What did Isis look like?
Oh my God. First of all, she was huge. I mean, she was maybe 10 or 12 foot high. She had this long black hair with these bangs. She had the snake on her arms, the two snakes, and she had the snake around her forehead as a crown. Her clothing was magnificent with silks and kind of something like velvet. She was barefoot. Her skin was this beautiful brown color of the earth. Her eyes were flashing coal black, and her voice was strong but kind of southern and gentle. There was this really intelligent but close to the earth energy. She's truly like Gaia. She's truly the great mother of this earth.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. Imagine journeying beyond the ordinary into realms where spirit animals, ancestors, and guides are waiting to speak. My guest, Linda Starwolf, is a visionary elder who carries the torch of shamanic traditions. Through breathwork and sacred teachings, she helps us remember who we really are, souls on an eternal journey of love, healing, and awakening. Join me as we explore how shamanic wisdom, breath, and spirit can transform our lives in ways both profound and practical. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now, let's go chat with Star. Star, welcome to the show. I'm so thrilled you could join us today.
Thank you for the invitation to be here.
Oh, my honor. Everybody, Star wants to do a little ceremony for us as we begin our chat. So I asked her to please describe it as she's going through it for those of you that are listening and not watching. And so, Star, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me here and allowing me to offer this ceremony today. And this is a very abbreviated one, but still very potent and powerful, because sometimes, the biggest prayer is my Grandmother Twylah Wolf Clan grandmother taught me, but sometimes the biggest prayer is help and thank you. So I have here, for those who cannot see this is a beautiful swan fan, came from Iceland. And this animal passed in a natural way. It was not hunted or anything, but a beautiful student and graduate of our programs created this beautiful fan. And in this tradition, in the Wolf Clan tradition of the Seneca, the swan is the bird of surrender and grace. And so we have that. And then I also have some blue lotus from Egypt, from my friend in Egypt, where we take journeys. And I have some sacred sage here. So at this moment, I'm going to light just a little bit so we don't turn on fire extinguishers. That's happened not to me, but to other people in a big auditorium. All of a sudden, the sprinklers turned on and people were drenched. So I'm just lighting just
And the swan fan, you guys, is big. It's it's not just a few feathers. It's like the whole wing.
Yeah, this is a wing. And so if you want to describe it, there's also crystal from the Crystal Mountain there in Iceland. And there's also the fur, the hide from the wild horses that are there, that this young woman who is a shaman there found the horse and was able to respectfully, she knew how to take care of that and to create medicine objects. So she actually created this. She brought everything together.
Beautiful.
The horses for that ability to have strength, inner strength, and to take us where we need to go. And the swan is to take us there with grace and ease. And the crystal, of course, is to open our higher consciousness to receive the blessings.
And I can smell the sage.
Oh, I know you
As
can.
soon as you lit it, I can smell it. And I can taste it. I can taste it, too.
You've given me chills just saying that. And for those who are open, like you absolutely can. So, but everybody has the ability for that. Sometimes we just haven't awakened it. And of course, that's what you're about, what I'm about. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to be moving the fan over the smudge, this beautiful abalone shell. I'm sending it out to the east to call in new beginnings for all of us, for our country, for the world, for all of us. May we have new beginnings in our lives as we release the old that may have served us at one time, but not any longer. And in the South, we come to a place of fertility, of creation, because when we let go and we go through that space and we go to the bigger picture in the air and say, oh my goodness, the vision, then we have to come back to the earth. We have to come into the fires of transformation and say, okay, how do I manifest my dreams? How do I manifest my visions and my sacred work in the world? So we call on the helpers from the South. And then we call on the helpers from the West. And this is truly where we go through the dark night of the soul frequently. And it's where the bear is actually associated in some traditions with the West. That we go into our own bear cave. And sometimes it's important to do that, isn't it? That we come away from everybody and go into an internal vision quest, and we go into the inner void. And in that place, we seek a vision. And we be prepared to let the old dissolve. And then we go to the north. And the north is the place of the old ones who have passed on all of the great white hairs. And some of them haven't passed, but the grandmothers, the grandfathers, and that can be the wolves, the white lions, and all of those creatures that represent that eldership, that grandmother, grandfather energy, those who've walked around the wheel many, many times and who've died and been reborn many times and hopefully have come into their dharma and their sacred path, and that they have many, many gifts. These are the ones who are truly, they know the whole wheel. They've seen it all, and that we listen to them, and they share their mistakes as well as our missteps, as well as their victories and wisdom. So they're the wisdom keepers. And last but not least, we go to the great above, to everything that watches over us, whatever you feel that is for you, the great star nations. And we go to the great below, down into the core of the Mother Earth, into her hot, hot iron womb, where all life rises up on this planet and gives us a green earth, creates our atmosphere in our home for a little while, because we didn't come from here. We're visitors. It's our home now, but it's not where we end up. Take a moment to go into your great within and imagine yourself standing or lying right there in the middle of that beautiful medicine well with that beautiful smudge smell of sage, sweetgrass wafting over you. And you are in the center now, connected to the great above and the great below and the great within your own heart, and knowing that you too are sacred, that you too have shamanic roots to the earth, but also to the cosmos and to multidimensional realities. Aho.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I could smell the sage the whole time, and I could even my right ear was tingling even when it was going on. We can explore that later, what was going on with that, but as soon as you lit that, because you lit it off camera, I couldn't see you light it, but I could smell it as soon as you lit it, and then, like I told you, I could taste it as well, so thank you for that. What a lovely way to start our chat. Appreciate that. What happens when we live without a spiritual connection?
Oh my goodness, I can speak really well about that. You'll have to shut me off. um, I was always, I think like all children, naturally spiritual. I think that's a God-given gift that we're born with that. We don't have to, crawl across the desert for it. We are born that way. But for most of us, things happen in our childhoods. It's life. It's not necessarily anybody's fault. Sometimes it's overt, sometimes it's covert, sometimes it's unconscious. But whatever happens, because we are earthlings, we have certain things that we go through, and it creates wounding, the sacred wound in all of us. Even if we had the best of childhood, I really had a great childhood. But the person I loved most, my grandmother, died when I was 12. And it broke me open, and it was the 1960s. And I went into that scene, which was beautiful in many ways and similar to what's happening in the world today. And at the same time, there was a lot of temptations. And as a young woman at the University of Kentucky studying to be a social worker at 18 years old, I went into experimenting with lots of psychedelics and lots of different other kinds of drugs and things, not thinking to be a drug addict, basically, or anything, or an alcoholic, but experimentation. But when I'm one of those people that has always been extremely sensitive, probably like you, and other people, it was a phase. For me, it became an addiction. And so I hid it because I'm also a perfectionist, and I became a licensed clinical social worker and a therapist and all these things. But in my shadow side, I had this unhealed pain in my heart, and I was still using substances to mask that. But I didn't even know it. That's what denial is. Don't even know I'm a lying to myself. And so it took a while. And at 29, at my first Saturn return, I hit a bottom. I finally realized, and there was things that built up to help me wake up. And I realized that I was dishonest with myself and others, and that I was going to die if I didn't go ahead and voluntarily die to my old self. So that's where I really woke up. I was already serving the planet, already a mother and a wife, all those things, but I was living a double life. Since then, I found many women like myself who are like that, and men too. But in my recovery, and I did recovery work through AA and having a sponsor and also getting therapy myself. But then it made me want to help other people in that arena. So then I became a specialist in the field of addictions. So frequently, as most shamans and healers, it's our greatest heartache and heartbreaks that have led us to the path that we're on, and that we know it from the inside out, and we know how to help and assist people to move through those places and to learn the lessons, and for perhaps even those so-called failures or hitting bottoms actually become sacred medicine.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. Thank you for sharing that intimate story about your life. I know that there are a lot of us who can relate to that with the addiction, and I'm a recovering sugar addict, and so I have not had sugar in over 6.5 years, and gave it up when I turned 60 and just thought, "Okay, I can't control this. I need to just stay away from it." And I am the original Cookie Monster. Oh.
Well, I have some friends on my side who would argue that they've had to call me on it because I'm also a recovering food person, and I've given them permission to um, call me out when they notice me stepping over the line.
Well, addiction's addiction. And
Yeah.
I finally just got to the point I thought, "Oh my god, this is what, like, people that are addicted to cocaine feel like, that they think about it all the time, and they have it, and they want more, and forget it." So, yeah, so I think a lot of us can relate, not necessarily with drugs or alcohol, but there are lots of different things we can be addicted to, even social media, even our phones, even uh, watching certain amounts of television or whatever, Netflix, people binge on that and it's an escape. So there are lots of ways to do that. What's a shaman? What's your definition of a shaman?
Well, there's a lot of different definitions, and there's a few that I really, that I look at for myself. And some people feel that a shaman, has to be from Peru, that it refers directly to indigenous peoples. And certainly, there are many indigenous peoples who refer to themselves as shamans, but there's also indigenous people who do not see themselves as shamans. And what does it really mean? So it means a lot of different things to a lot of people. For me, when I began to really step into the world of working with Native peoples, especially my Wolf Clan grandmother, and many others as well. But she's the one who became my primary teacher in that particular field. I was already steeped in transpersonal psychology with Jacquelyn Small, who just turned 90 recently, who's an amazing, amazing healer and teacher. There's nobody like her on the planet. There's truly not. She's still my teacher, and I'll be 73 this year. So it's great to still have a teacher. So these people, to me, are all shamans. Some may not call themselves that. Some may never see themselves as that. But the shaman for me, in a nutshell, means people who are willing to grow. People who are willing to continue to face their dark side as well as embrace their light side. And to not live in spiritual bypass. To do shadow work. To always, as Carlos Castaneda said, to stalk one's own shadow. Not in a derogatory, blah, 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 but to stalk oneself means to have an eye on yourself, to keep it. And if you need help, to say to your buddies, keep an eye on me if I go for the big cookie jar, that sort of thing. That's why people have sponsors in AA. That's why people have accountability with gurus or teachers, is that we're not meant to do it alone. Where two or more are gathered, there you will find me. So this whole sense of the shaman for me is that we all have things we can't see. We all, if we're growing, we're always going to be experiencing some sort of death, just like the cells that are dying off, thousands of them in our bodies right now. Sometimes we don't even notice it. Other times we get sick when that happens. So simultaneously, there's a whole bunch being born. So don't be too afraid of the death. It's okay to have fear. But remember that always, if we let it, always, 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 after death comes rebirth. Always.
I agree. And you have to shatter the old in order to allow the new to come in, because you've got to have room for the new. What's an Aquarian shaman?
Well, what I spoke about before about the indigenous peoples, and I'd like to take credit for coming up with that title. But many, many years ago, when I was just a little wolf pup with Grandmother Twylah, she said to me, I said, Gram, I'm not indigenous, and so I really want to learn the teachings, but I don't want to do appropriation, or, I want to be respectful. And she was smiling and, at me. And she said to me, first of all, she said, thank you. Thank you for that acknowledgement, because a lot of people just want to come and just want to take, and that sort of thing, and they're not respectful. And she said, she's the one who gave me my name. She said, but Star Wolf, that's not you. You're always respectful. You're always giving back to me in any way that you can. And she said, and that's why I'm entrusting you with these teachings, because I know you're going to carry them to many, many people. These teachings are not for just, quote, indigenous peoples. They're meant for the world. She said, but I also want to tell you something, and for you to wake up. Do you belong to this earth? Do you love this earth? Were you born here on this earth? Do you eat food, drink water, breathe air? And I said, yeah. She said, do you pray and do ceremonies and plans? She said, you are indigenous to this earth. All human beings, all animals and creatures, all the creepy crawlers, all the standing people, the trees, the plants, the flowers, are all indigenous to this earth.
Good point.
And she said that I appreciate your respect, and you're right about people stealing medicine and, all the stuff that happens in that kind of way that's narcissistic. She said, but that's not you, and that's not who you'll teach. You will teach people who want to remember their own indigenous roots, because the sooner all of us can remember that we're indigenous to this earth, even though if we came from other places, from the Great Spirit, we will take care of this earth and each other.
Mm-hmm. You've referenced a couple of times about your wolf pack and your grandmother. Was your grandmother American Indian, Native American, or what? Tell us about your grandmother and tell us about your wolf pack.
Well, my biological grandmothers, my Mammy Jones, who was Scotch-Irish, wild woman, the one that passed when I was 12, who got my soul and gave me the initiation of dying and plummeting me into the darkness for quite a while. But she was the one who held my soul, and she was very much like an indigenous grandmother. She was more of that Celtic, I called her a Jesus-loving Celtic, you know. So we went to, the church on Sunday, to the Baptist church, and then we went home and prayed to the fairies and the aliens as we planted the garden. So there was no conflict for her in that, And so that's how I grew up in that way. She passed when I was 12, which threw me into a shamanic initiation, as I shared, that eventually turned into dealing with that pain through substances and other things. However, my other grandmother was from England, and my grandfather was from Ireland. So there's all this kind of, Celtic and, that kind of druid sort of energy. And of course, in this country, they were Christians. And so that was all blended together for me. And there wasn't anything sacrilegious about that for me. Got mixed messages sometimes on Sunday morning at church. But other than that, the family didn't see it that way. And so I would dare say they would probably see, Christ as a druid, as a master druid, that sort of thing. But my grandmother passed, and actually both my grandmothers passed fairly young. And I felt my young parents were really good parents, but they were busy with their lives and work. And I was the only child. And I felt like a longing for a long time to have a teacher, a wisdom teacher, somebody that really understood the things that were going through me, because I've been, it's weird to say this, I've been shamanic my whole life, which I think everybody is, quite frankly. We're indigenous, we're all shamanic. We all go through death and rebirth. But maybe I had a little extra dose when they dropped me here. And I felt like a fish out of water, and especially in the little town I grew up in, Western Kentucky, because some of those Christian people didn't necessarily think what I was doing was Christ-like, smudging or things like that would be seen as one person said, that's something that only an agent of the devil would do. And so I was just sharing this with a friend of mine, dear friend, who's a psychologist, and we're best buddies, about some more things we share about our childhoods with each other, about having that projected onto me when I was a social worker and a counselor, because I brought breath work and some other things into people, and it scared them to death. I was ahead of my time there. When I went on out into the world and went to other places and found Grandmother Twylah when I was in my 30s, after I'd gotten sober and was really dedicated to my path of discovery, and had started meeting people who were doing things like smudging and sweat lodges and various things. And I was doing those things, but I still felt adrift. And I don't have time to go into it here, but through sequences of pure magic, this woman appeared to me not in physical form. And it took me a while, because this was dial-up phone time, where you call and give somebody's name in a town and see if you can find a phone number. And this person, somebody suggested that the person I was seeing might be Grandmother Twylah Nitsch of the Seneca Wolf Clan. And there's a reason why, because I don't have time to go into, but synchronicities of why it thought that might be her. Now, the woman who suggested this was one of my best friends, who was a Cherokee Native American woman, and we were friends, and she lived in Kentucky with her family. So anyway, speeding this up, she suggested that I look for her, because she had come to me in a dream and a vision and gave me the name Star Wolf. And I had drawn a picture of it. I still have the picture that I drew on a little piece of paper 40-something years ago, with a star and a wolf, and saying, is this me? And so I called information, and I'd heard that this woman, who was a Wolf Clan teacher, lived on the Cattaraugus Indian Reservation. And somehow, through the operator and everything else, I got a phone number. I called it, and it was and a woman answered, and she said, hello. And I said, I couldn't even hardly breathe. I just said, is this Grandmother Twylah? And she said, hold on a minute, I'll get her. And so it was like 5 minutes, and back then, you're like, "Oh my god, is she coming back? How much money am I gonna owe this phone call?"
Yeah.
She came on, and she said, "Graham is not gonna talk to you. She wants you to come here." And I'm like, "Well, I live in Kentucky." And she said, "She'll see you in a couple of weeks, and you need to come up." And I'm like, "Well, give me the directions." She gave me the address. So I flew. It was up in outside in Buffalo, New York, and on the Cattaraugus Indian Reservation. So here I am, blonde hair, blue eyes, driving, okay, flying to Buffalo, getting a car, and then driving about an hour and a half or 2 out into the middle of nowhere, looking like
Wow.
this, except a lot younger, not knowing where I was going or even how to find the house. And then I've written about it in my books, but it led me up this long driveway onto this big piece of land out by a river, and scared to get out of the car that somebody might shoot me if I was at the wrong house. And when I got there, all of a sudden the back porch door opened and this woman stepped down the steps and walked towards me. I thought she was 10 foot tall. Now I'm 5 foot. I used to be 5'1.5", but I'm 5 foot now. She came walking. She was a giant. But when she got to me, I had to look down at her because she was shorter than me.
Oh,
And she
wow.
looked at me and she grabbed me by the arms, gave me a little shake, and she looked me right in the eyes and she said, "What took you so long?" And I said, "Well,
Oh,
you came in a vision. You didn't tell me where you lived or anything, and I didn't even know if you were real." And she said, "I don't mean that. I mean, what took you so long?" And I said, "Well, yet you didn't tell me you didn't give me any information." She said, "I gave you obviously enough. You're here." And then she took out my arm. She said, "Never mind. Let's go in. Let's get down to it." And that's where my relationship began with her until she passed in 2007.
oh my
And
goodness. So how many
she's
years
even busier. She's in my dreams all the time now.
so how many years did you work with her before she passed?
We were together, I'm going to say, let's say it was 7, and then I'm going to say about 14 years.
How wonderful.
Yeah.
What a blessing. Talk about divine intervention. Good heavens. With that whole and I'm sure the story gets even better when we read it. We'll read it in your books. Did she teach you about breath work?
No, breathwork was from Jacquelyn Small. Now Grandmother Twylah gave me the name, Star Wolf, and then she said and I said, "Well, are we shamans? What are we?" And I said, "'Cause, this is the color of my skin." She said, "You are," and she thought about it for a minute. She said, I think she thought it in the moment. "You're an Aquarian shaman." And I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "Well," she said, "there's a new generation." She said, "Sun Bear and all these other teachers throughout the 60s and 70s that were natives, they broke their own rules and started teaching people that were not, quote, red-skinned native people. But they too kind of became hippies in many ways. If you go back and look at that era, and it began to be a rainbow tribe of people of all colors. And part of the reason for that, it was very savvy, was that the Native Americans, it was against the law for them to practice their spirituality. They go to prison for doing a sweat lodge or a medicine wheel or any kind of ceremony. And so when the people of different colors came together and started coming to the rainbow tribes and gatherings of ceremonies and healing, they would have had to take people of all kinds away. And eventually, Grandmother Twila was one of the ones who helped write to Congress and protested in Washington and did all kinds of things and was helping to help bring forth the right, basically, for them to practice their own spirituality.
I've never heard that. It doesn't surprise me. It's awful. I'm sorry they went through that, and I'm glad they got on the other side of it. Back to breath work, you learned that before you met Grandmother Twylah.
Yes, I did. And that's how I met her, was in a breath work and had the vision. And that's part of what happens to people sometimes in their journeys, and I'll tell you about that, and sometimes in their journeys, they will see an animal suddenly they never had connection with before, or they'll see an alien, or they'll see a grandmother or a grandfather, or a power animal, or the tallest tree in the world, or the mountains in Peru, or like in front of me, I'm staring behind here in my curtain are the pyramids, and they'll see something, and that all of a sudden they're called because they know in that vision that it's calling to them, that there's medicine there for them, that there's magic, that there's um, something divine about that connection. That all of life is symbolic and metaphoric and medicine. So um, when before I got sober, I was 29. Actually, at that point, I was 28. And I was a counselor, and I went to a conference, and I was hungover. It's the truth. I was a really good counselor, but at the same time, I wasn't living my truth. And so I went to the conference, like 200 or 300 people there, and it's very conservative in Western Kentucky at a, conference center. And I'm hungover. I'm sitting in the back row. I don't want anybody to see me. I'm doing this to get my CEUs. And this woman steps up on the stage. And this is, like I said, I'll be 73 this year. So go back to when I was 28. And it's all been a very conservative teaching about addiction and this, what to look for and how to do this and mental health. She gets up, and they said for an experiential piece. I don't know what that was. She gets up there and she pulls the curtain back. She has a humongous gong. And she starts beating on it slowly, going, and she starts going, and I'm thinking, wow. I mean, I loved it. I'm no hippie. What is this? And everybody else in Western Kentucky is looking like this, like this strange look, like, who is this woman? Pull her off the stage. But anyway, the point is that she started doing a meditation, and she had us envision a problem in our lives. And then she had us imagine a helper or something, a guide coming. And then she imagined the highest vision we could have to how we could resolve that. And then to bring it together where it formed a 6-pointed star, these triangles up and down coming together. And in the center to find our soul's answer to that problem. And then I was so touched and altered from that simple 15-minute journey. When it was over and she was signing her book and I went up, I waited to be the last person. And when I walked up to her, she put everything down and walked over and put her arms around me and hugged me and said, "Welcome home, kindred spirit."
Wow.
And at that point, she said, come up to my room. So I went up to her room, and she sat and she talked with me, and she said, "Now," this is how psychic she is. She would look me right in the eyes, and she said, "Now, when you get sober," I thought I was going to wet myself. She said, "No," and I was embarrassed. She said, "Now, when you get sober, I want you to come and be a part of my team, because I have something I want to teach you. There's a man named Stan Grof with holotropic breathwork. He's written this book, Beyond the Brain. I want you to get it and read it. And that's what I'm working with right now, him and his wife, Christine, with holotropic breathwork. And also I've worked," she said, "with Leonard, who created Rebirthing." And she said, "I'm going to teach you breathwork." So I didn't have any idea what she was talking about, but I left, and she wrote me a letter about once a month for a whole year or two. During that time, I got sober, because she said, once you stop drinking, I didn't even register it, but now I realize she put that seed of consciousness into me. She did that, and she's done that for thousands of people. If you haven't read her book, she has 12 books out there. She's written about from codependency to co-creation. Her first book was Transformers, Therapist for the New Age. Her work is fabulous.
For those who've heard the term breathwork but have no clue what it means, other than it involves breathing, what is breathwork?
So breathwork is, and there's many different kinds. I don't know how many people are familiar with Leonard, who was really the one who kicked off breathwork in the modern world. Because prior to him, you go to India and you find a guru and you learn how to meditate, or you go to the cave and find the yogi and, dedicate yourself to becoming a disciple or whatever, and you learn breathing techniques. Many people read Paramahansa Yogananda's book. And it was one of the books I read when I was younger, and wished I could go to India and meet a guru that would show me all these breathing things and show me how to heal the world, you know. And so Leonard did. He went there and he found, Babaji in a cave and became his disciple and learned how to live on just air and water and for a long time. And that's a real thing that happened for him. And so then he came back to this country, and he wanted to share what he learned. So he started teaching, like Ram Dass did, and Ram Dass was part of our group too that I worked with, and that he came back and he started something he called Rebirthing, which went all around the world. He's written several books. He's passed now. But Jackie, my teacher, breathwork teacher, breathed with him before I ever met him. And she had gone through a miscarriage and was really in a horrible place where she still had to carry the baby till it was born. I know, we won't go there. But anyway, this is the dark ages then. So he breathed her and with the rebirthing, and she was really, she said, healed inside and out. And there's a long story to it, but she was healed.
You had a visit from Isis. Tell us about that and tell us what resulted from that visit.
Oh my gosh. I've had so much connection with Isis. And when I first went to Egypt in 2000 and can't remember exactly now if it was 2003, maybe. I went with Nikki Scully, who was the primary person who was taking people to Egypt. She'd been taking people long before people started going. She became good friends with a man named Mohammed Nazmi. And he had started a tour company, and his family had a certain amount of wealth, and he started the first tour company in Egypt for people who wanted to go on mystical, magical journeys. And Nikki was, Nikki was friends. She's still around, but she's retired now. But she was friends with really good friends with the Rolling Stones and, Janis Joplin and all those people. She took the Grateful Dead. Her husband was at the time the manager for the Grateful Dead. So she took the Grateful Dead and went over with the people, and a whole bunch of people showed up in front of the pyramids and the Sphinx, and they did a rock and roll concert there, and it was all free and everything because this is a time when nobody's going to Egypt. All right. And after that, she was inspired. She had such an amazing experience. She was inspired to work with her friend, Mohammed Nazmi, who was to start a tourist company, spiritual tourism, because she was a shaman, and that she would start bringing people there. So for up until just a few years ago, she took over 60 trips there at 2 or 3 a year of taking people there and introducing people to the mysteries of Egypt. And that's how I got there. We met in California because I lived in Fairfax and she lived in Portland, Eugene. But we met each other online, and then we started hanging out together. And she said, "You've got to go to Egypt. This is who you are." So anyway, we go to Egypt, and I went into, and I've written about it a lot in my, Nikki and I wrote 2 books on Shamanic Egypt, Shamanic Mysteries of Egypt, and divination cards to go with it. But anyway, we were there, and I went into a huge experience of a involuntary, in some way, channeling episode that put me in an altered state the entire almost 2 weeks we were there. And in that, Isis came to me and started, I frequently don't like the word channeling because of what I hear it becoming, but there's nothing else I know how to call it. That I began to channel something that in my logical, reasonable, everyday Western Kentucky world knew the mysteries of Egypt from within. It's as if the hieroglyphics were transformed into my language, and I could interpret them. I saw the energies. Isis would be before me. I thought, well, back in the day, I did a lot of psychedelics, I thought, surely Nikki would not slip something to me, I even asked her, she said, no, I would never do anything like that, and
Because it reminded you of when you were high?
I was hallucinating. I couldn't feel my feet touch the ground. I was panicked. I thought, I guess I've had a psychotic break. I don't know what's going on. And it happened when we landed. We flew over the Sphinx. We landed and I got off the plane and I knew something wasn't right. And I couldn't feel my feet on the floor. And I've written about it quite a bit to people. I was terrified. My husband was with me, who's deceased, and he passed in 2014, but he was there. He was worried sick. He was going to bring me back home, take me to the doctor. She said, Mohammed, we'll get all the doctors there. They all came in. They said, she's fine. She's healthy as a horse. Maybe she's having a psychotic break. We don't know what's going on with her. And then at that point, Nikki said, you know what? And she had just gotten her first little laptop and brought it with her for the first trip ever that she'd ever taken it, because she didn't have one. And I didn't either, and nobody did. But she brought it. And she said, it's got a recorder on it. And you're going to lay down and you're going to let these beings speak through you. And she recorded that. Then we had it transcribed, and it became the Shamanic Mysteries of Egypt and the Anubis Oracle deck from all of that channeling. And it was nothing that I had ever been taught, seen, or known from anywhere. And at that moment, when I came through that, once I channeled all that energy, 2 weeks later, they had to carry me around. I couldn't even feel the ground under my feet. She said, you're going to do the rituals. I'm like, I don't know how to do the rituals. She said, let them come. Let Isis speak. So that's what I did. And so Isis really, my husband at the time, Brad and Isis and Nikki, literally carried me through Egypt. We had 50 people with us. And I had to go in front of them and say, I know that I invited you to come. And let me tell you what's going on with me, because I'm having a hard time. And so I shared with them, and they were like, wow, that's so cool. I wish this was happening to me. I'm like, you can have it. If I could pass it to you, I would. This is freaking me out. But at the end, the last night when we went into the pyramids, the Great Pyramid, and each one of us had about 5 minutes to lie down in the sarcophagus, Osiris's sarcophagus. Every one of us got to do that. We were in there like 3 hours. Once we did that, and we came back out and the sun was rising, it all changed. All of a sudden, I started to come back into my body, because it was the resurrection. And when we ate that night, I could actually taste food. And then the next day, we were prepared to leave. And as I was flying home, I realized that I wasn't hearing the voices, because that sounds like a psychotic break. I wasn't having channeling. It just all dissipated. And I came home. And when I came home, she called me from, by that time we'd moved to North Carolina. She called me, I think it was on Valentine's Day. We'd gone in October, November, and she called me and she said, I'm listening back over this, Star Wolf. This has to be a set of books. This is unreal. She said, I've been to Egypt all these times and I have never had such deep channeling ever. And she said, and I've had the top channelers here. So I just said, are you sure, Nikki? I mean, I really was some kind of embarrassed about it in some way, in some weird sort of way. Not from other people. I've always admired it. But I think maybe I didn't feel smart enough.
What did Isis look like?
Oh my God. First of all, she was huge. I mean, she was maybe 10 or 12 foot high. She had this long black hair with these bangs, and she had the snake on her, on her arms, the two snakes, and Bhutan and Wajet, the snakes, and she had the snake around her forehead as a crown. Her clothing was magnificent with silks and kind of something like velvet, but it felt like something else. And she was, she was barefoot. Her skin was this beautiful brown color of the earth. Her eyes were flashing coal black, and her voice was strong, but kind of Southern and gentle. There was this really intelligent, but close to the earth energy. She's truly like Gaia, she's truly the great mother of this earth and of this ancient wisdom. She had great love for her husband, Osiris, who died, and shortly, not too long after, not very many years after I got back from there, my husband, I've remarried now, but my husband that I love dearly passed, and I really felt her with me as he went through his cancer process for a year and a half of dying. And I felt her with me every step of the way. She has become one of my closest allies. And she promised me that she would bring me through it and that she would bring love to me again. And I was like, I don't even want to hear about it, you know?
Yeah, I bet. So she's one of your main spirit guides, sounds like.
She's always
Yeah.
with me, her as a, interestingly that, gods and goddesses are kind of like an accordion, and they kind of like, in her younger form, she's Nephthys, she's that in that luminal world, she's more the subconscious. She's the maiden, but as the mother, the great mother, she is Isis. And as the grandmother, which is where I feel I am moving into now, she is Hathor. And it's like the 3 in 1, like in Christianity, and she unfolds in that way and in our development, So for me, I'm in this deep, deep place of beginning to know what it means to move from mother to I was a grandmother at 40, but this is different, a different kind of grandmother, not only to your own children or grandchildren, but you have a responsibility as a grandmother. You have a responsibility as a great mother, grandmother to this earth and to every living thing, to speak about life-giving things and to call out injustices, to call out the shadows, to not be in spiritual bypass, and at the same time to be able to travel to the stars and to see the bigger story and to seek wisdom both from within and from without.
Tell us about what Isis suggested you do in your neck of the woods and what you built as a result of that.
So she came to me in a vision, and she just said, build it and they will come, that sort of thing, And so my husband at the time, we moved here. We had moved here, and I didn't
In
know
North
why.
Carolina, to North
Yeah,
Carolina.
from California.
Right.
He was from Ohio. I was from Kentucky, and then we were together in California, and then we moved here. She made it all possible. There's lots of stories around it, so there's no time to tell all those. But the synchronicities to lead us to this particular land, which is, like 40, 50 acres. It was a really, it's mountain, it's forest, it's wild land, that sort of thing, just next door to Cherokee. It's the Cherokee Nation. And we just came looking like maybe we might move here from California. And lo and behold, we came up this road and drove back into this cove, and it just took us over. And we've said there's so many impossibilities, and we felt how much it was going to cost, and all those things you tell yourself initially, this is impossible. But I always say the impossible just takes a little longer. So we went back to California, and things worked out for us to come back and to there was an old house down there at the time, to rent that place and to potentially find the way to buy the land. And obviously we did. We found, things happen, too many stories to tell right now, but we did. And at that time, other people started showing up because they were like, well, we want to be a part of that. We want to come here and live in the mountain, and we want to be on the land, and we want to do breath work, and we want to learn about Egyptian mysteries, and we want to learn about, the Wolf Clan teachings. The Wolf Clan teachings are really about honoring the earth and being a good person, and helping people have faith in themselves and each other, and to remember that we're all related. Omatakwiyase, we are all brothers and sisters. So that was what was the vision for the creation. And, it's been a long time now, and it's been an evolution. And there's been, people have come and gone. There's been buildings that were here that, were older that are gone, and there's newer things. And, and then there's the elemental temples over on an adjacent piece of land that we bought, where we could create temples dedicated. They're outdoor temples, but with like a roof with columns, and we have a beautiful life-size sculptor piece of Isis sitting there over a waterfall, and so it's a magical waterfall. We've even had a couple of people who said they had a miracle of healing in the waterfall physically. I don't want to propagate that, but that's just, and other people have had emotional pieces, because each person gets to come up and sit with Isis and cry to her and tell her their deepest heartbreak, because she understands she lost her husband, her beloved, and that created the compassion she has for everybody who has ever lost anything, which is all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right real close to her, about 50 feet away, is another roof with a life-size statue of Sekhmet, the great lioness, the great spiritual warrior. And she's sometimes people's favorite. She's as Grandmother Twylah would say, she's the kick, buck, fry, bacon goddess of Egypt. If you want to transform your life, call on her. If you don't want to transform your life, do not call on her. She's Sagittarius.
Wonderful. Couple more questions as we're winding down here. Are there 3 easy practices that anybody can do to help them stay aligned, help themselves stay aligned?
For me, I'll tell you what I do. I don't know about others, but first of all, is breathe. As long as we're breathing, okay. But to be conscious of your breathing. And most people, I find that almost anybody that walks through my door, some of them have already been doing yoga, or it's much more popular now to know about breathing. Like I said, one day there was 3 birth practices on the planet of different kinds. Now there's 5,000 probably, whatever, But what I would say to people is, when you get up, is to be aware of your breath, and to start, give some deep breaths and get yourself awake and get you open your heart and all that. And then if you can go outside, great. If you can't, you can stand where you can look out a window or whatever. But do the, help and thank you, touching your heart, reaching out for help to the great above, bringing it here, bring it to the earth, and do that 3 times. You'd be surprised within that 2 or 3 minutes of touching, reaching for the heavens, touching your heart, and blessing the earth, with your hands, with your love, and blessing your own beautiful heart. Doing that just 3 times, and say it out loud as a mantra. Help and thank you with sincerity. I think that prayer that Grandmother Twylah passed to me, and many others she passed it to and I've passed to, is the greatest prayer that I really know, because it's humility. It's acknowledging that something is there, that we believe, we have faith, we have hope, and acknowledging, and that it cares about us, and that we can call on it, and then we can bring it all the way into our life, into the earth. And then we can pull it up into our heart as medicine to share with others. So to me, that is one of the most powerful practices. The other, for me, simple practice is to light some smudge. I have lit smudge, whether it's cedar or, sage, or the lotus leaves, or whatever it is. I can't even imagine the thousands of times, because I do it every day, and sometimes several times a day, and all of our ceremonies and workshops and trainings. I have no idea how many times I have smudged or smudged others in the world. But every time I light that piece of herb and to smell it, what I was told to do was to imagine that God inside of me, the Holy Spirit inside of me, the Goddess inside of me, is smelling this for the greater gods, if you will, that are around us, that it connects us. And it says, I'm willing to move out anything around me that is not serving me, or that's, anything that I need to change. That's what the smudge is saying. It's not just saying it's going to take it from you. You got to put a little elbow grease into change. But the smudge itself reminds you that you can take something and you can burn it and release it to spirit. That you can take that and release it and let it go. And it's a scientific fact that the people, the researchers who have said, why did these people choose these different herbs? And then they begin to go, oh, this is medicine. If they refine it, do different things and put it in a pill even, it's a medicine. We know that herbal medicine is real. And so this using the herbs in that kind of way is a powerful way. And people use it in all kind of ways, but my main way is for purification and to remind me to come home to myself. So smudging, again, you can take a half an hour and do a beautiful ceremony, or you can do it for a minute. And if you train yourself, the minute you smell it and you pick up your feather that you found when you were walking, a blue jay feather, whatever, or your, maybe a crystal or a stone that you've found, your crucifix, your wolf necklace, whatever, to call on the helpers. I have lots of spirit guides and helpers, and I frequently call on the energy of the wolf in the Seneca clan, and in many clans. And I wrote a book called Spirit of the Wolf, and it talks about how there's wolf clans all around the world, even in Japan. And different people have not acknowledged the wolf. It's probably the most recognized creature as a spirit guide. And so there's all these different wolf clans all around the world. Find your clan, find your totems. Notice what keeps showing up in your life. Notice what comes in your dreams and your visions. Notice how your heart feels when you see a swan or a hawk, or a frog, whatever it might be. It could be a little ant, and how strong they are. They're the strongest creature on the planet. They're the only one that can pick up way more. I forget how much it is, the quotient of how much they can pick up in according to their body weight, but it's more than any creature on the planet. They are the strongest creature on the planet. So acknowledge, instead of going, oh, an ant, just say, hey, buddy, let's put you outside. And thank you for reminding me that I have inner strength.
Wonderful. Last question. Why do we incarnate?
Well, I think that, I've studied a lot of different, one of my degrees is in, world religions and spirituality and that sort of thing. And I find the thread through all of them, to me, where it really becomes that it's all one thing. Of course, people have, and of course, there's always the dogmatic. I hate to blame dogs for that anyway, but it's there's always the fundamentalist, and that's made for people who are more fearful, who are afraid of God, who are afraid of spirit, who are afraid of, that they won't be forgiven for their mishaps, their missteps, that sort of thing, But if Christianity really believed in it, they would know that everything is forgivable. Christ even forgave people that crucified him, And so whether you believe that's metaphor or it actually happened, it doesn't matter. It's the archetype of it. At least in my world, it doesn't matter. The archetype is real. The archetype of being able to be a person who can evolve and grow and open up to higher principles and to do their best to walk that talk, knowing that they're going to fail. Human beings, we have a little bit of devil thrown in there with us, and a little bit of shadow, but I think that if we just remembered consciousness all the time, there would be no place for growth.
Right.
I
agree.
It's like we were meant to explore consciousness, the light and the dark. And as one of my spiritual teachers said, human beings, as goofy and crazy as they can be, boy, were they really, really filled with this desire to explore consciousness in all of its dimensions, and to see how far down they can go and how far high they can go, and all the places in between. And of course, it reminds me of Dr. Seuss. Oh, the places we will go.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
Well, you are an amazing combination of Earth Mother, historian, intellectual, and medicine woman, in my opinion. And thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for putting these concepts out there in the world. How can people learn more about you and your work?
Well, I have 13 books out. Most of them have been published by the prestigious company, Bear and Company, and Inner Traditions. So you can check, some people don't like Amazon. I'll say you go into Amazon, you can find all my books there. And I write about a lot of different things, but they basically have the same themes as we've talked today, whether I'm writing about the wolf or Egypt or shamanic breathwork or whatever it might be. So that's one way to learn. But they can also go to my website, and the website's been around. In fact, we're getting ready to renew it again for like the 5th time because it's over 30 years old. Not this one. This iteration is only about 10 years old, but it's already old now because of what's happening in technology. But go to Shamanic, Shamanic, shamanicbreathwork.org. You can also email me personally if you want to. And that is easy to remember. Starwolf, STARWLF, at shamanicbreathwork.org.
Terrific. And we'll have all of that in the show notes. So everybody, lots to think about here from this conversation. In the meantime, we're sending you love from Sweet Home, Alabama, mwah, and from North Carolina, too, where Star is. We'll see you next time. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends.